The 401 was clear all the way into Mississauga, which almost never happens in October. My dispatcher called around noon and told me I could park the rig early. The next load wasn't ready until Saturday. 6 weeks out of province, and all I wanted was to walk through my own front door and find my son in the middle of the living room floor with Lego bricks spread across every square foot. I'd been hauling freight on the Trans-Canada since my son was 3 years old. It was never the life I'd planned for myself, but after my wife died, pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end, the road had a way of being the only place I could think clearly. A man alone in a cab for 12 hours has nobody to perform grief for. He just feels it and keeps driving. That October, Liam was 8. He'd made it through 2nd grade with decent marks, and had recently developed a specific obsession with Lego Technic sets that required reading instruction manuals the size of small novels. When I called home from rest stops, he'd spend 10 minutes describing a gear system he was building. I didn't understand half of it. I told him to keep going anyway. I pulled into our driveway on Hadwin Street at 4:15 in the afternoon. The house was dark, the lights should have been on. It was overcast and the October sky closes in early in Brampton. I used my key, called for Liam, called for Krista, walked through to the kitchen, a single mug in the drying rack. Nothing on the counter that suggested a kid lived there. His bedroom was the thing that stopped me cold. The bed made perfectly, corners squared, no wrinkles. Liam made his bed the way most 8-year-olds did, which is to say not really. The Lego sets were gone from his desk. His hockey bag wasn't by the door where it always lived. My phone buzzed. Krista. Brent. Not hi, not you're home early. Just my name, said the way you say something you were hoping not to have to deal with yet. Where's Liam? A pause. He's at the Frontier program. I told you about this. Donovan Pierce's foundation out near Swift Current. I had a blurred memory of her mentioning something on a phone call from Wawa, a connection so patchy I'd spent most of it saying, "Can you repeat that?" When did he leave? 11 days ago. 11 days. My son had been somewhere I'd never heard of for 11 days. What kind of program? Character development, back to basics, outdoor work, responsibility, structure. Liam was acting out, Brent, talking back, refusing to do his homework. He needed something you and I weren't able to give him at home. Liam wasn't acting out. He was 8 years old and his mother had been 3 years gone. And some weeks that number still hit him like new. Give me the address. You'll disrupt everything if you go charging out there. These programs have a schedule for a reason. Krista, the address. A long silence then. Frontier Youth Foundation. Rural Route 4 off Highway 4, about 40 minutes south of Swift Current. But Brent, please don't go making this into something it isn't. I was already looking at the map on my phone. The drive from Brampton to Swift Current is roughly 22 hours straight through. I didn't do it straight through. I drove to Pearson, caught a standby flight to Regina on points I'd been saving, and rented a truck from the airport counter. I was on Highway 1 heading west by 9:05 p.m. The Saskatchewan prairie at night looks like the end of something. Flat black in every direction, grain elevator lights in the distance, the highway cutting straight and endless under a sky that felt close enough to touch. I stopped at a Tim Hortons in Moose Jaw. For coffee I didn't taste, and drove the rest of the way without thinking too much, because thinking too much was where I'd been living for 3 years, and it hadn't gotten me anywhere. The turnoff for Rural Route 4 came up unmarked. I nearly missed it in the dark. The road went from asphalt to gravel within half a kilometer, then to dirt. My headlights caught fence posts, and then more fence posts, and then, after 10 minutes of rattling over frozen ruts, a cluster of buildings, a main farmhouse, 2 large outbuildings, a pole barn at the far end of the property. A hand-painted sign near the gate read, Frontier Youthation Character Builds Character. 1 light on in the farmhouse, 2 trucks in the yard. I parked and knocked, no answer. I tried the handle, locked. That's when I heard it. A voice, thin and young, calling out a count, then another voice answering, coming from the direction of the pole barn. I followed the sound around the side of the farmhouse, across a frozen mud yard where my boots broke through the surface crust with each step. The temperature had dropped below 0 overnight, and the cold was the sharp Saskatchewan kind that gets into the back of your throat. I could see my breath in gray puffs under the security light mounted on the barn wall. The barn doors were open a foot. I pulled one back. There were 12, maybe 14 children inside. They ranged in age from maybe 7 to 13. Some were mucking stalls. 2 were hauling water buckets that were clearly too heavy for them. 3 were repairing sections of wooden fence rail along the far wall, driving nails with hammers in the cold air. They wore work gloves that didn't fit, and jackets too thin for October in Saskatchewan. One girl was rubbing her hands together between strokes of the hammer. A man in a canvas barn coat stood near the center of the space with a clipboard, watching. He looked up when I came in. "This is private property. I'm looking for my son." I scanned the barn. My eyes moved row by row, the way you do when you're terrified of what you might find, and more terrified of not finding it. Then I saw him. Third stall from the left, forking dirty straw into a wheelbarrow. He had his back to me, but I knew him immediately. He had his mother's posture, that particular way of holding the shoulders that I'd spent 14 years watching across breakfast tables, and I would know it anywhere. "Liam." He turned. His face was chapped raw. His lower lip was cracked and had bled at some point and dried. His hands, even in the gloves, were visibly swollen at the knuckles. He had a scrape along his jaw that he hadn't had when I left in September. He stared at me for a full 2 seconds, like he was trying to decide if I was real. Then he dropped the pitchfork and ran. He hit me so hard I had to take a step back to stay upright. His arms went around my waist, and he was crying before he got a word out. The kind of crying that sounds like it's been held in for a long time, and just found the exit. "Dad, Dad, you came. I've got you, buddy. I'm right here. They said you signed the papers." He was talking into my jacket, not looking up. "They said it meant you didn't want to be my dad anymore. They said I had to earn my place back by working hard. That was the only way you'd take me home again." Everything in me went very still and very certain at the same time. The other children had stopped working. They were watching us. A few looked at my face, then looked at the man with the clipboard. Some of them looked like they'd stopped expecting anything good to walk through that door a long time ago. "Sir," the man with the clipboard was moving toward me. "I need you to step outside. You're disrupting the program. These kids are in a barn at 11 at night in October. They're on a structured schedule. Work, meals, reflection. Where do they sleep?" He didn't answer fast enough. I shifted Liam to my left arm and walked past him toward the back of the barn where a door opened into a newer addition. Plywood walls, a concrete floor, 2 rows of cots. I counted 14 cots, 2 wool blankets each. A single space heater plugged into an extension cord. No insulation that I could see. The temperature in the annex was maybe 5 degrees warmer than outside. A boy who couldn't have been more than 7 looked up at me from a cot where he'd been sitting, still dressed in his work clothes. He had dark circles under his eyes, so deep they looked like bruises. "Are you somebody's dad?" he asked. "I am." "Mine's not coming." He said it like a fact he'd already made peace with. "Can I come with you anyway?" That took something out of me that I haven't quite gotten back. The man with the clipboard appeared in the doorway behind me. He had his phone out now. "I'm calling Mr. Pierce. You need to leave this property. Call whoever you want." I took my phone out and called Krista. She answered on the second ring. "What did you sign?" I asked her. "Brent, it's almost midnight." "What did you sign, Krista? What papers?" A pause. "It's a program enrollment agreement. Standard thing. It gives the foundation temporary guardianship so they can make decisions for Liam during the program, in case of a medical thing, or whatever. It's completely normal. Temporary guardianship. It's just paperwork." Donovan explained it. He said it protects the foundation legally if one of the kids gets a scrape. It's not. It doesn't mean anything. "Did you read it?" Silence. "Did you read what you signed, Krista?" I heard her exhale. Donovan was very reassuring. He's been running this program for 6 years. He came recommended by 2 families from our church. I put my phone in my pocket without saying anything else. Liam was still holding my arm with both hands, like he'd decided to never use them for anything else. Donovan Pierce came into the barn at 11:22. He was in his mid-50s, broad across the shoulders, wearing a fleece vest with the Frontier Youth Foundation logo embroidered on it. He had the practiced calm of someone who'd managed confrontations before and found them manageable. "Mr. Bergeron. It just came out. My actual last name is Lacasse, but I wasn't giving this man anything of mine. I understand you're concerned. Liam's stepmother thought the structure here would. My son doesn't have behavioral issues. He's a child who lost his mother. And our program addresses the root causes of. He's 8 years old, and he's been mucking cattle stalls at 11 o'clock at night in October. All of these children have. I looked around the barn, in a province where the overnight temperature dropped to -4 last week. He kept the smooth voice going, resilience, character, program design. I let him talk for about 20 seconds before I said I was leaving with my son. His tone shifted. That would constitute removal of a ward from legal guardianship. I'd have to contact the authorities. Then contact them. He nodded to the man with the clipboard. 2 more men appeared from the farmhouse. Bigger, younger. I've driven transport trucks across 4 provinces for 12 years. The work keeps you strong in ways you don't always notice. I kept moving toward the gate with Liam in my arms. The RCMP cruiser came up the gravel road with lights on at 12:10 a.m. Constable Trask was young, mid-20s maybe, and looked like he'd been hoping for a quieter night. He took in the scene, me standing by the rental truck with Liam. 3 men from the Foundation ranged against me, Pierce standing slightly apart, recording everything on his phone. Want to tell me what's going on here? Pierce stepped forward immediately. Constable, thank God. This man assaulted my staff and is attempting to remove a child from our legal care. We have the paperwork. I have it on video. That's my son. I turned so the constable could see Liam's face in the security light. Look at him. He's been working outside in this temperature for 11 days. Look at his hands. Constable Trask looked. His expression shifted the way a person's does when they see something they can't unsee. Mr. Pierce, he said quietly, I'd like to see the facility. You'd need a warrant for. I've got probable cause standing right here. You going to show me, or are we going to make this a longer night than it already is? What happened over the next 5 hours is a matter of public record now. Constable Trask called for backup. 2 more cruisers came, then a sergeant from Swift Current, then someone from the Children's Aid Society on an emergency line. Pierce tried to be cooperative until his staff started contradicting his story. One of them tried to drive away and didn't get far. They found the financial records in the farmhouse office. Donovan Pierce had standing contracts with 3 agricultural operations in the area. Fence installation, stall maintenance, land clearing. The foundation received payment for all of it. The children received nothing. Their parents had been told they were enrolled in an outdoor leadership program with a $1,200 fee for the season. Most had paid it. There were 19 children across 2 locations. Pierce had a second property 40 minutes north. I sat in the rental truck with Liam while everything unfolded outside. He'd stopped crying. He was pressed against me, not talking, which was unlike him. Liam had been a talker since he could form sentences. The quiet was the thing that frightened me most. A paramedic checked him over. Mild hypothermia, early signs of malnutrition, blisters on both hands from ungloved work in the cold, a respiratory infection that hadn't been treated. He needs to go to a hospital, she said. I'm not going without you, Dad. First full sentence he'd spoken in an hour. I'll follow the ambulance, I told him. I'm not leaving, I promise. Krista arrived at the hospital in Swift Current at 7:30 in the morning. She looked smaller than usual, or maybe I was just seeing her differently. She tried to go to Liam. He turned away from her and faced the wall. I didn't know it was like this, she said to me in the corridor. Donovan told me it was like Scouts. Hard work and fresh air and discipline. He said boys need that, especially boys without. She stopped herself. You gave temporary guardianship of my 8-year-old son to a stranger. It was just a formality. He told Liam I signed papers. He told him I didn't want to be his father anymore. I kept my voice down because Liam was 10 meters away on the other side of a curtain. 11 days. My son believed for 11 days that I had given him away. Krista put her face in her hands. The cast worker took Liam's statement 2 days later, when he was out of hospital and staying with me at a motel in Swift Current. He described days that started at 5:30 a.m., porridge for breakfast, watered down, fence work and stall cleaning until noon. Lunch was bread and processed cheese slices, more work until dark. Dinner was lentil soup, the same pot stretched across the week. If a child complained or asked to call home, they were sent to the reflection room, a storage room off the main barn with no window and a bolt on the outside. Liam had been put in the reflection room once. He had asked to call me. Donovan Pierce was charged under the criminal code with unlawful confinement, child labor exploitation, and fraud. He received 32 years in federal prison. 4 of his staff received sentences ranging from 7 to 18 years. Krista was charged with criminal negligence in relation to a child. At trial, something came out that reframed things without changing them. She'd grown up in a house where her parents worked constantly and had built everything she had through what she called hard discipline. She genuinely believed Pierce was offering the kind of structured hardship she credited with making her who she was. She thought she was doing something good for a boy whose father was on the road, 6 weeks at a time. It didn't make what she did right. It made it make a particular kind of human sense that was almost worse to understand than if she'd just been cruel. She received an 18-month sentence and 3 years probation. I quit long haul, took a local driving job in Kitchener, took a pay cut I felt for a year. Liam and I moved into a smaller place, closer to my sister, who'd known my first wife and still talked about her the way people do when they loved someone. For the first 4 months, Liam wouldn't touch his Lego sets. I'd packed them from Brampton, set them up in his room. He didn't go near them. He said his hands were for working, not playing. He said it like a rule he'd memorized at the Frontier program and hadn't yet figured out how to unlearn. I didn't push. His therapist said not to push. Then one Saturday in February, I came downstairs early and found him at the kitchen table. He'd pulled the biggest Technic set out of the box, a crane truck with over 900 pieces. He had the manual open and the base plate in front of him. He didn't say anything when I sat down. He just slid over to make room and handed me a section of pieces to sort. I sorted them, and we built for 3 hours without talking about anything important, and that was the morning I knew we were going to be okay. The trial ran 7 months. I testified twice. Liam testified once in a closed session with a support worker beside him. He was 9 by then, going on 40. The other 18 children went home to their families. The boy from the cot, his name was Mateo, I learned later. His father was a seasonal worker in BC who hadn't fully understood what he was signing. Didn't speak for 2 months after being released. A girl named Sienna needed surgery on her right hand where an untreated cut from fence wire had become infected. They were free, though. That was the thing I kept coming back to on the nights when I couldn't sleep, and added up all the questions I should have asked before I drove back onto the highway in September. They were free, and free was the starting line. A year after the trial ended, a family resource center in Kitchener asked if they could use Liam's story, with his permission and his contribution to it, as part of a workshop for parents on recognizing exploitation warning signs in youth programs. His therapist thought it was a good idea. Liam agreed with one condition. He wanted to help write the list of questions parents should ask. He sat at that kitchen table with a notebook and wrote out 11 questions in his careful, slightly crooked printing. Can my parent visit at any time without notice? And, do the children have access to a phone? And, can you show me in writing exactly what activities my child will be doing each day? We printed them on a card and handed them out at libraries and community centers and school parent nights across Waterloo Region. A journalist at the local paper wrote a story. More invitations came. At one of the school talks, a father raised his hand and asked why Liam had decided to go public with something so painful. Liam looked at him and said, "Because I thought my dad didn't want me, and if one kid doesn't have to feel that way because we said something, then it's worth it." He was 10 years old. He said it without any performance, just flat and certain, the way he said most things. I didn't trust myself to add anything after that. 3 years after the night I drove down rural Route 4, we went back. Pierce's property had been seized and eventually sold. Someone had bought it and converted it. The pole barn was gone. In the paddock where the children had worked in the October dark, there were now 3 horses standing in afternoon sun, tails switching, unhurried. Liam stood at the fence and looked at them for a while. "It's different," he said. "Yeah. Better different, or just different." I thought about it honestly. Better, I think better. He nodded. He reached through the fence slats, and one of the horses, a bay with a white blaze, walked over and put its nose in his hand. "Do you think Mum would have known something was wrong?" he asked. "Faster than you did?" My throat did what it always did when he brought her into a conversation sideways like that. Maybe. She had good instincts. "You came, though." "I came." He watched the horse for another minute. "I want to find Matteo someday. And Sienna. See how they're doing. We could do a thing, like a get-together for all of us when we're older. Show each other who we turned out to be." I didn't say anything, just put my arm around his shoulders. He leaned in without making a thing of it, the way he'd done since he was small. We stood there until the horse lost interest and wandered back toward the others, and the October sun started dropping behind the tree line the way it does on the Saskatchewan prairie. Sudden and orange and enormous, the kind of sky you don't see anywhere else. I've thought a lot, in the years since, about the night I came home to that dark house on Hadwin Street. About the time I spent standing in Liam's room, trying to talk myself out of the feeling that something was wrong. About how close I came to deciding the feeling was just the paranoia of a man who'd been away too long, that the neat bed and the missing Lego were just evidence that Krista was running a tighter ship than I did. I've thought about what would have happened if the dispatcher hadn't cleared my load early. I think about the other fathers, the ones who got the same reassuring phone call from the same smooth voice and went back to their routes and waited for the weekend. The ones who were seasonal workers or working nights and couldn't just drop everything and drive 3 hours into the Saskatchewan dark. The ones who trusted the right logo on the vest and the right language on the paperwork, and the neighbor who vouched for the program from the church parking lot. The ones who never found the thing that felt wrong because they were never in a position to look. Evil doesn't come looking suspicious. It comes with a brochure and a waiting list, and a testimonial from someone who didn't look closely enough. It uses the language of structure and character, and giving your child what you're too busy to give them yourself. It finds the gaps that working parents carry, and it makes those gaps feel like the problem. The only answer I've found is the one Liam wrote down at that kitchen table. Ask the questions. Demand the answers. Show up without notice. And if someone tells you your concern is disruptive, that your presence undermines the program, that your child needs space from you, that's the moment to stop listening and start driving. I started driving that night in October. I didn't stop until I had my boy in my arms. I'm not going to call that heroic. It was the bare minimum. The hard part came after, in the months of staying in the same postal code and learning to be the kind of present I hadn't known how to be before. But he's here. He's whole. He asks good questions, and he builds complicated things, and sometimes, when he doesn't know I'm watching, I see him smile the exact way his mother used to smile, sudden and private, like a door opening just for a moment onto something warm. That's enough. For now, that's more than enough.